Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're jumping into a book that, well, really made waves in how people think about money. Rich, Poor Dad. We've gone through it and pulled out what we think are the biggest takeaways as real light bulb moments from Robert Kiyosaki. We're going to unpack how these two very different father figures shaped his whole view on wealth. And our goal here is to see what surprising lessons you can grab about, financial literacy, assets, and making money actually work for you.
Yeah, and what's really effective is how he uses stories, right? It's a narrative. He takes these potentially complex financial ideas and makes them super accessible by filtering them through his own childhood, through these two voices.
Okay, let's get into that core idea then. The two dads. So Robert Kiyosaki, he grows up with these two major fatherly influences, totally different. First, there's his actual dad, his biological father, who he calls the poor dad. Now, this guy was highly educated, PhD, secure government job, professor, I think. But financially, he struggled. His advice was always work hard, get good grades, climb that corporate ladder, the standard path. Then there was his best friend's dad, the rich dad. This guy, a high school dropout, but a really successful entrepreneur. And he became Robert's mentor, teaching him totally different things about money, assets, investing. So the whole book uses these stories from when he was a kid to show these clashing mindsets.
And what's fascinating there, right from the start, is how it just throws down a challenge to what most of us are taught. That traditional path to financial stability, the poor dad path, Kiyosaki basically says, hang on, maybe there's another way. It immediately makes you question the conventional wisdom about careers and money. Gets you thinking.
Yeah, it really does. And one of the first big lessons, maybe the biggest, from Rich Dad was, the rich don't work for money. My poor dad, Kiyosaki says, taught him to find a secure job. Rich Dad said jobs alone, they won't make you wealthy. Instead, the rich figure out how to make money work for them. The key point he pushes is learning to spot opportunities, build things that generate income assets, and create these streams of cash flow.
That's a huge mental shift, isn't it? Because most of us are wired to think time equals money, trade hours for a wage. But Kiyosaki's pushing you from employee thinking to owner thinking, owning the source of the income. It's about leveraging systems, businesses, real estate, things that make money whether you're actively clocking in or not, much more scalable.
Right. And this leads straight into his take on financial literacy. He says, it's not really about complicated formulas. It's fundamentally about understanding this. It's not just what you make, it's what you keep. And, crucially, how well you make what you keep grow. And here's where I think it gets really interesting for a lot of people. The middle class often buys things they think are assets, but they're actually liabilities, like maybe a bigger house that just ends up draining your cash every month. I know I fell into that trap before reading this.
Absolutely. He cuts right through it with simple definitions. Does it put money in your pocket? Regularly, that's an asset. Does it take money out of your pocket? That's a liability. It sounds basic, but so many people get it wrong. They think their car or even their primary residence is an asset. But if it's costing you money consistently, mortgage, insurance, repairs, gas, graft herring, it's a liability in his terms. Understanding that basic difference. He argues that's the foundation of real financial intelligence.
Yeah, that asset liability thing is huge. And that idea connects to his next point, this concept of mind your own business, which doesn't mean ignore everyone else. It means focus on your business, which is building up your asset column. Don't just focus on your job's income. He actually encourages people, keep your day job, sure, but use your off hours and spare cash to start acquiring assets, things like rental properties, stocks, maybe a small side business, things that work for you.
And tied into that is how the wealthy or the financially savvy use structures like corporations. It's not just about running a big company. It's about using these legal structures strategically. For protection, yes, but also for growth and, importantly, tax advantages. If you connect this to the bigger picture, like you said, it's about understanding the rules of the game. Kiyosaki points out, often employees pay the highest tax rates percentage-wise, whereas business owners, using corporations smartly, can operate within a system that allows for, well, more deductions and different tax treatments. It's about knowing the framework.
Okay, so mind your own business, building assets, understanding the system. Then there's this idea that the rich invent money, which sounds a bit dodgy. But it's not about counterfeiting. It's about developing what he calls financial intelligence. This lets them see or create opportunities that other people just miss. So instead of just saving diligently for, maybe a few % return, they're looking for creative ways to get much larger gains, finding deals, structuring things differently. And a big piece of how you develop that intelligence is this other principle. Work to learn, don't work for money. The idea is choose jobs sometimes not for the pay, but for the skills you'll gain. Skills like marketing, sales, investing itself, leadership, things you can use later to build your assets. Talks about his own experience, right? Working for Xerox specifically to learn sales. Not because the pay was amazing, but because he knew sales is crucial.
That's such a critical point. It reframes your whole career potentially. You start seeing jobs not just as income sources, but as training grounds, building your personal toolkit. It really underscores this need for constant learning, self-education, skill building, rather than just, doing the job description. And it does raise that important question, doesn't it? How can you spot those learning opportunities? Even if they aren't the highest paying gigs right now, it's about playing the long game.
Definitely a long-term perspective.
Hmm.
But, okay, this path sounds great, but it's not easy. Kiyosaki is very clear about the obstacles. He lists 5 main ones stopping people from getting rich. First is fear. Big one. Fear of losing money, fear of failure. Then cynicism. That little voice saying it won't work or worrying too much about what others think. Self-doubt. Third is laziness, which he often links to just not putting in the effort to learn about money, avoiding financial education. Fourth, bad habits, like the habit of spending everything that comes in or spending before you save or invest. And fifth is arrogance, thinking you already know it all, so you stop learning.
And these are really deeply psychological, aren't they? The fear isn't just about numbers on the spreadsheet. It's fear of looking stupid, fear of stepping off the well-trodden path. Cynicism can paralyze you. But Kiyosaki flips it. He says failure isn't the end. It's part of the process. You learn more from mistakes than successes sometimes. So overcoming these internal barriers, he argues, is just as vital as understanding, say, cash flow, maybe even more so.
Okay, so it's a mindset shift, overcoming fear. But what about actual steps? What can you do? He does give some practical advice for getting started. It's not just theory. First, find a really strong reason why. Your why. Something big enough to push you through the tough times. Then, choose your daily habits carefully. What you do every day matters hugely for your financial future. Small things add up. He also really pushes learning from experts, finding mentors if you can. And this is key. Take action. Don't just read and plan forever. Start doing something, even small. Imperfect action is better than none. Oh, and pay yourself first, meaning put money towards your assets before you pay your bills or spend on extras. Make investing a priority. And finally, he suggests mastering one asset class first. Don't try to do everything at once. Get really good at real estate or stocks or building businesses. Focus.
Yeah, that action point is huge. He really hammers that. It's not about waiting for the perfect investment or knowing everything. It's about getting in the game. And mastering one class makes sense. It's about depth, right? Really understanding a market or an asset type so you can spot those opportunities others miss. And embracing mistakes as learning tools. He sees failure not as a disaster, but as feedback. Essential feedback for getting better.
The book is also full of these really memorable stories that make the point stick. Like that one about him and his friend as kids trying to make fake nickels by melting down old toothpaste tubes. Totally failed, obviously. But it was this early lesson in thinking creatively about generating money, even if the execution was flawed. And then there was that powerful story about Rich Dad making him work in his shop for practically nothing, like 10 cents an hour or something. It wasn't about the wage, it was a lesson. Rich Dad wanted him to see opportunities beyond just earning a paycheck, to think like an owner, not an employee.
Those stories are just brilliant pedagogy, really. They take these abstract financial ideas, leverage assets, opportunity costs, and make them concrete, relatable, even kind of entertaining. It helps you see that financial intelligence isn't some academic skill. It's about real-world observation, problem solving, and sometimes failing and trying again.
So if we were to sort of wrap up the core philosophy of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, it's maybe not your go-to guide for detailed step-by-step financial planning, like exactly which stock to buy. It's more of a big picture motivational book. It fundamentally challenges that traditional script. Go to school, get a safe job, work 40 years, retire. It pushes hard for building passive income. Income you don't have to actively work for day to day.
Yeah.
Through smart investing, maybe starting a business, and definitely through continuous financial education. Build assets, understand the difference from liabilities, learn constantly, take calculated risks, and get your money working for you. That's the essence, I think.
Absolutely. And maybe a final thought for everyone listening, based on this deep dive, just consider this. How might really focusing on building assets, on continuous financial learning, how might that shift your perspective, your view on your career choices, maybe your spending habits, your long-term goals? Regardless of where you are right now financially, it's about rethinking what security means and maybe rethinking the relationship between your time and your money.
That's a powerful question to reflect on. An excellent place to leave it. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into Rich Dad, Poor Dad. We hope it's given you some food for thought and maybe encourages you to keep exploring these ideas on your own financial journey.